what's next is the dreaded stone paradox.
Oh, yes. Come
So,
on, S tier.
yeah, oh my goodness. Okay, so Homer Simpson famously, it all goes back to, no, it doesn't go back to Homer Simpson, but he famously asked, could God microwave a burrito so hot that he himself couldn't eat it? And that's basically what we're getting at. I'll put it in terms of the stone because, okay, fine, it's a stone paradox. I like the burrito paradox better. It's much, has a better flavor to it. That was good. That was good.
Zing.
Okay. Yes, that was a good one. Okay, anyway, the question is, could God create a stone so heavy that he himself could not lift it? If yes, then there's something that God can't do, namely lift the stone, and so God can't be omnipotent. If no, then there's also something God can't do, namely create the stone, and so God can't be omnipotent. Either way, God can't be omnipotent, so an omnipotent being is impossible.
Yes. God is crushed under the weight of this metaphorical rock.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. You talked about omnipotence. I think most people, when they're defining God, do say God is omnipotent. That is sort of all-powerful. So one easy way out of this is just to say, oh, I believe in a God who's not omnipotent. Problem solved instantly. He just can't do like all things. Cool, easy, that's fine. But a lot of people want to say, no, God is all-powerful. So if God is all-powerful, then is this not a paradox, Joe?
I don't think so, no. I mean, we really just have to get clear on what exactly it is to be omnipotent, right?
Exactly.
So the argument here is trying to infer that God is not omnipotent from the fact that God can't do something. But that doesn't follow. Since if something is an impossible task, then God's inability to do it, that's no threat to his omnipotence. I mean, omnipotence, as theists typically understand it, is to at least a very rough approximation, something like the ability to do whatever's possible.
Yep.
And so, if something is impossible, well, then, I mean, of course God can't do it, but it's also no threat to his omnipotence that he can't do it. Because again, omnipotence is just the ability to do whatever's possible.
It's so obvious that, like, if you say, well, omnipotence is the ability to do anything, and you could just think, okay, well then, can God do an impossible thing? Well, hold on. Yes? No, we can't do something that's impossible. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? And so instantly it's just this paradox. And that's so sort of obvious and self-defeating that this can't be what we mean by omnipotence. Like you say, a good definition of omnipotence is the ability to do anything that's possible. So God can't make a square with 3 sides. But as you say, that's not a threat to his omnipotence because it's just something that's not possible. This does at least, somewhat uncomfortably maybe, put like restrictions on God. It seems like there are these things called logical laws which sort of constrain God and what he can do. Like if God really wanted a triangle that had 2 sides, like he just sort of couldn't do it, even if he really, really wanted to. I mean, in a sense, Joe, that might seem like a strange thing to want, but like I would love genuinely to see like a triangle with 4 sides. Like, wouldn't you love to see it? Like, that would be awesome. Like, if I said, dude, I've got this triangle with 4 sides, I've drawn it on a piece of paper, do you want to see it? You'd be like, yes, I want to see that. That sounds like the most interesting thing in the world. So for God who can do anything, he must be like, what? How fascinating it would be to see a triangle with like 4 sides, but he can't do it. And so it seems like God is like constrained in a way that might make some theists uncomfortable.
I'm kind of at a loss for words and how to respond. I mean, I don't know. Okay, sure. I think it'd be interesting if, I mean, obviously I'd want to see it because I'd want to point out where exactly you're going wrong and where exactly you're kind of confusing yourself. I mean, I wouldn't want to see it because I think it'd be like awesome to have that power. I don't think it's awesome to have that power because I think it's impossible to have that power. So if something has that power, then it's just an impossible being. An impossible being that, that's not a great being. I mean, it's impossible. So I think I think what they'd say is like, no, God isn't more awesome or better if he like has the power to do these impossible things, because that would require that God is impossible. And that wouldn't make God better. So I don't know. I don't see too much plausibility here.
The reason why it would be so cool to see a 4-sided triangle is because it's impossible. If I just showed you it and you were like, oh right, it would suddenly become a lot less interesting. I think is the thing that's fun about it is that it's like, what the hell are you talking about, man? I don't even understand. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, one helpful way of thinking about this, I've got a friend who talks about things existing both in the intellect and in reality. Like a unicorn exists, it just sort of exists in the mind, right? And there's a sense in which like the word unicorn has a referent, in the same way that like Sherlock Holmes seems to have a referent. Like when I say Sherlock Holmes, there's a sort of thought that attaches to, in a way that all of the characters that Arthur Conan Doyle never wrote about and no one ever wrote about don't seem to have a referent. They seem to even if like Sherlock Holmes doesn't exist, the characters that were never dreamt of by any author seem to exist even less, if you know what I mean. And so there's sort of like levels of existence. There's existence in the mind and existence in reality. And the way he thinks about this is to say that, yeah, God can do all things. It's just that logical contradictions just aren't things. They're literally like not things. Like a square triangle is just not a it's just not a thing. It doesn't have a referent. Even in the mind, it literally just doesn't attach itself to any real thing, any real thought, any real concept, any real object, like nothing. And so God can do literally all things. It's just that like when you say, can he create a rock so heavy he can't lift it? Or like a triangle that's got four sides, that's just not a thing, man. It's literally not, there's nothing that thought can attach to as a referent.
Maybe. And maybe there's something to that. I don't know. It seems to be resting on assumptions that I don't like, that they're like, I don't know, different kinds of existence or different like ways of existing, or like different like degrees of existence or something, which I'm very much opposed to that. I even have a hard time understanding what that could possibly amount to. I just think something either exists or it doesn't, and there's just one univocal sense of existence that applies to everything. Either there's zero of something, so like there are zero unicorns, or there's more than zero, and that's all that I mean when I say that, like, you know, unicorns exist. Like there's more than zero, and there's more than zero of them, right? So
well, no, I don't know about that because you know, would you say that spatial extension exists?
Well, I think spatial extension would be a property of things, and
Which exists.
whether or not I think properties exist, you know, I mean, I tend to lean towards thinking properties exist, like redness exists. I tend to lean to
like
that way.
How many rednesses are there? I mean, there's either zero redness or there's like 2 redness or 3 redness, right?
No, there's only one property of redness, and it's what all red things share in common. That's probably... Anyway, we don't need to get bogged down into metaphysics. We've got the argument on our hand, and
sure.
In my view,
basically, what I'm saying is, I think I like this argument more than you do. I don't think it works, but I think it's got a bit more like room for fun than I think maybe you're giving it credit for. I think that like the idea of there being constraints on God is fun to think about. The idea of what exactly that means, the sort of the slightly condensed definition of omnipotence that at least requires some kind of debate. You might sort of stop a theist in their tracks for 5 minutes to be like, well, can he do everything, or just all possible things? Do impossible things exist? And if so, are they things that God can't do? Like it's sort of it's a thinker to some degree.
Yeah, and it definitely like it spurs interesting philosophical reflection on what exactly it is to be omnipotent and our analysis of omnipotence. In short, we want to have an analysis or an account of what it is to be omnipotent that doesn't succumb to the paradox. And I guess it has philosophical utility in that regard. And so for that reason, I wouldn't put it in the F tier, because it has philosophical utility, as you're saying, and like spurring thoughts and helping people refine their notion of omnipotence. But in terms of like an argument for atheism, which... I mean, listen, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking E tier, okay? So right above F.
I might say that.
Yeah, right above F.
I think that's fair, especially because, like, you know, got like the concept of omnipotence is quite a strange one. I mean, like obviously religious traditions have always described God as like all powerful, this kind of stuff, but this like really philosophical, analytic sort of concept. I mean, everything we're doing here is quite inappropriate, really. We're talking about this God, this being that we're supposed to relate to, who reveals himself through narratives and peoples and nations and all kinds of stuff. And we're sort of like, yes, but does he fulfill the necessary and sufficient criterion of being able to, if P is the set of all possible things, does it, you know, that kind of crap just feels like a bit inappropriate. So like against this like religious tradition, and also against the fact that someone can just say omnipotence just means the ability to do all possible things, and against the position that somebody could say, yeah, well, maybe omnipotence is like a slightly lesser quality than we had it, than we thought, or maybe God isn't omnipotent. There's just like so many reasons to be like, this should remain both on the sort of Twitter feeds of cringe atheist meme pages and
Yes.
also in the E tier.
Yes. I mean, in terms of like whether or not it succeeds, like I would actually put it the F tier, but because it has philosophical utility, it's going in the E tier, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it might sort of be like, if evolution is real, then why are there still monkeys kind of level of like you know what, it's actually an interesting question. Like it's sort of like, you know, if you don't get, you might think for a second, well, no, hold on, I mean, if we came from apes, why are there still apes? Oh, that's kind of interesting. And you get to learn about like diverging branches and what it means to be a cousin rather than a descendant. It's kind of interesting, but like once you've done that, once you've learned that, if you still keep sort of peddling it as like some kind of argument, something's probably gone wrong. So yeah, let's stick it in the E tier. That's my compromise with you. I can't bring myself to put it in F.
Okay, yes, that was an S tier analogy, I will say.
Oh well, thank you, sir. Plenty more where that came from.